This Week in Virology, the podcast about viruses, the kind that make you sick. From Microbe TV, this is TWiV, This Week in Virology, episode 702, recorded on January 1st, 2021. I'm Vincent Racaniello, and you're listening to the podcast all about viruses. Joining me today from Western Massachusetts, Alan Dove.
Good to be here. It's 35 Fahrenheit, 2 Celsius, pretty clear blue skies, but we're supposed to get some snow and freezing rain and wintry mix later tonight.
From Fort Lee, New Jersey, Dixon Despommier.
Hello, everybody. Happy New Year. It's kind of a gray day out here. I don't know what the temperature is, but I can imagine it to be cold. It's not snowing yet, but I was in the Catskills the day before yesterday, and it snowed like crazy. And the moment I hit the Wurtzboro Fault, which is the divide between the Catskills and the rest of the world, the sun came out. It was blazing. I had to put my sunglasses on. It was amazing. Quite an interesting change of weather patterns.
What fault did you call that?
Wurtzboro. It's the Wurtzboro Fault.
Wow.
When you go down, you went to Ithaca. You must have gone down that thing multiple times.
I'm sure I did.
You go down the big valley and then go back up the hill and you're in the Catskills.
I went down many faults while I was in Ithaca. From Austin, Texas, Rich Condit.
Hi, everybody.
Hey,
51 degrees Fahrenheit. Brilliantly sunny skies, headed for 53 today.
Oh, lovely.
It's a gorgeous day, and as soon as I'm done with you guys, I'm going to go for a big, long walk.
Cool. And from southeastern Michigan, Kathy Spindler.
Hi, everybody. Here we already have that wintry mix. In fact, I closed the blinds a half hour ago, so I don't know what it's doing. But one app says it's raining and the other one says it's snowing.
They're both right.
And they're both right. That's right.
And it's, 30 Fahrenheit -1 Celsius.
And from Madison, New Jersey, Brianne Barker.
Hi, it's great to be here. Happy New Year. It is similarly gray and 37 Fahrenheit, 3 Celsius here.
Similarly gray.
Have we ever done a TWiV on January 1 of any year?
Never.
I don't recall.
No, that's the reason why I emailed you.
Yeah.
Thinking, a similar approach to Christmas, New Year's, what the heck. But I'm glad that wasn't the case because I'm thrilled that we can all meet.
Well, I thank you all for doing this on New Year's Day. We'll try and keep it below 8 hours.
Yes.
We'll keep it. I have no email.
I have a pork roast in the oven. I've got to go at 5.
Oh, no, we'll be done by 5. I want to do an hour-ish. How about that?
Hour-ish is
Great.
great.
Name for that.
Good.
No email
And
today.
I've got to say, Kathy, it's great to be on an episode with you again. It's been
I'm going to say
a
that
while.
too
because you do
Yeah.
Wednesdays and I do Fridays.
Right.
I miss your smiling face.
There was at least one this fall that I did on a Friday because I had a
okay.
conflict on a Wednesday.
So
Right.
typically
Are you getting more work done this time?
Typically the first TWiV of the year, we look back at the previous year and go through the various stories that we like. Of course, this year there's really one story,
There's one story.
which is amazing. Of course, this has never
Welcome
happened
to
to
this
us.
year in coronavirology.
This has never happened to
Yeah.
us, and I don't think it will happen for.
Would you say it's unprecedented?
Yeah, if you want to overuse that word, but we.
It's unprecedented.
I doubt we will do a year with any virus in our lifetimes again, but it will happen again for someone.
I hope not.
For me,
I hope
that's
not
not a
to.
very long time, Vincent. Choose another definition of timing. So
But
I hope this is the last one of the millennium.
it's been bad in many ways. It's been interesting in many ways. And we're going to talk a little bit about our thoughts here, but just an overview. We published 120 episodes in 2020, which is usually we do 50 to 60 episodes a year. We started, and our tech had to change because we went home and we started doing video. We started doing Zoom video. And apparently Kathy said our first Zoom images with Udell episode 597. And then 623, we went to Zoom on YouTube. And so basically 581 to 700 were the 2020 episodes. And that included 42 COVID-19 clinical reports with Daniel Griffin. First, he started actually joining us on Friday afternoons from the parking lot in his hospital. And that's when we started getting criticism about the sound because many, many more people were listening. And then I broke him off into Thursday evenings, and I was fusing them with the episodes, and then they got so long that now he's got his own thing. But it's almost a weekly report from him, and the way things are going, he's going to keep doing that with us for a while.
And that's been a great addition to the show.
Terrific.
Because so
Terrific.
much, obviously, with the pandemic, so much comes through that that most of us are not really in touch with, and it's wonderful to have a source who's right there.
We're not clinicians as far as I know, right? So I think it would be nice if he came on monthly, after the pandemic and talked about clinical matters on TWiV. So we'll see how that goes. So only one episode in 2020, 581. That was our January episode a year ago. Didn't have any COVID coverage, except for some road episodes that were either recorded the year before or that we did just a few in 2020. So we published 2 from Galveston. Rich and I went to Galveston. I went to Singapore, and I published 5. We went to Bethesda, Rich and I. We did Fred Murphy, Bernie Moss, and Eugene Koonin. And it was a blast, but man, it seems so long ago. Holy cow. I did 2 at Georgia State last year. And then this year in March, I went to Ohio State. And then in November, I did an online with the American Society for Tropical Medicine and Hygiene meeting. So a lot less travel. And this is actually the TWiV tour, the TWiV World Tour T-shirt from 2018 that Sharon Isern made.
I have one of those.
Yeah. We had a lot of guests this past year, way more than any other year. Ralph Barrick, Valeria Canio, Ori Lieberman, Stephen Morse, Mark Dennison, Ian Lipkin, John Udell, Doris Cully, Christian Drosten, Stan Perlman, Kostya Chumakov, Mark Heisey, Nat Moorman, Jeff Shaman, Susan Weiss, Michael Schmidt, Raul Rabadon, Chuck Knirsch, Emmy DeWitt, Peter Daszak, Sabra Klein, Viviana Simon, Erling Norby. I think Erling was recorded last year, actually. Michael Minna, Tony Fauci, Denise Esposito, Adam Kucharski, Alfonso Landeros, Ken Lange, Mary Seals, Janet Sinsheimer, David Brenner, Tony Schounts, Robert Fullylove, one of my favorite, that episode, Lisa Smith, David Bruce, Shane Crotty, Amy Rosenfeld, Ari Kozik, Kishana Taylor, Lisa Grelinski, Nell Zeldy, Mady Hornig, Fiona Lowenstein, David Tuller, Kathleen Crowley, Kate Rubens, Peter Hotez, and Laura Splan. And, the ones that I recorded last year, I didn't mention some of their names. But
did you mention Kazmikia? Is she here?
She's not there. Kazmikia Corbett. Yeah, I missed some.
Kazmikia was an important one.
Yeah, he's going to save the world. I had missed a few that Kathy put in, but Kazmikia Corbett, yes. Now the guests have kind of fizzled off in the last month or two because, frankly, I'm Not guest burned out. I'm scheduling burned out. Because it's not trivial to do the scheduling. It's a lot of back and forth, blah, blah, blah. And then the tech is stressful when things don't work, but we'll try and resume in, what year are we in? 2021.
Yes, 2021.
So in terms of productivity, it's been awesome. And, our guests have been great. All of you for participating. We went to 2 times a week. When did we start doing that? Does anyone remember? Early in the year?
1965, I think.
Right. And so now we do 3 a week because then Daniel's is an extra one. So it's not going to continue forever. But we'll see. There are some issues still arising, as you know, and we'll be frequent as long as that happens. But I start teaching in January twice a week. And, to do that, and those are all recorded and produced. So we'll see how that goes. I want to thank some people who have been involved with helping us. Jolene Ramsey, of course, for doing all the timestamps for not only TWiV, but other Microbe TV podcasts as well. Das Coronavirus Bullet Points by Irina Yakutenko. I haven't seen one in a bit, but those are always great to find out what Christian Drosten is saying over there in Germany. Amy Rosenfeld, of course, stepped in on a number of episodes to help us out. And in the International Space Station episode, she was on the phone in my office with Mission Control in Houston, getting cues from them. And
also a significant production team from NASA.
That's
helped
right.
us out with that. I forget all their names, but they were terrific.
Yeah, they were great. And I remember at one point she goes, 5 minutes. I said, what?
That's right.
She said, she wrote on a sticky pad, too long. Oh my gosh. Okay. And early in the year, Kiki wrote some summaries of episodes for us. Kiki's comments, those stopped. She told me she couldn't keep up with it. So thank you for doing that early on. And if we've missed any of you, sorry. Now, along with doing video, the YouTube channel has grown, Microbe TV over at YouTube. I remember maybe late last year, early this year, Google had this thing where if you had 25,000 subscribers, you could apply for grants, right? So we had at the time 18,000. I said, I'll get us to 25. Couldn't do it. We got to 20. And that was the beginning of 2020. We had 20,000 followers. Today, we just hit 78,000 subscribers.
Wow. On YouTube.
On YouTube alone.
That's
right.
great.
And
That's great.
is really up and above our audio downloads, which have gone from, they have gone up tenfold, essentially.
Yeah.
You know, the statistic that Ray Ortega sent to me at one point, you know, in the previous 12 months, we've had 6 million downloads. And in the 12 months before that, 600,000. So it's gone up tenfold.
That's quite amazing.
And the YouTube, I have to say, a listener wrote to me early in the year and he said, why don't you just release the audio on YouTube? You don't even need a video because he said, I like to listen to YouTube falling asleep at night. So I did. So
kids do this. My daughter does this. Well, not falling asleep at night because we've got time limits on that. But she'll listen to music on YouTube.
Yeah. I put up the audio with just a picture, you know, and man, it started to get thousands and thousands of downloads per episode. And I think they're different from the audios, you know, because not everybody can watch. So then when we switched to video, and for many of the other podcasts, we've done the same. So except for TWiV, we haven't done the video on that. We only did 1 or 2 episodes with video. Didn't seem to have much traction there. So that's cool. And I also want to thank everyone for their contributions over the year through Patreon, PayPal, and even, man, I get some checks in the mail now and then, you know, and someone wants to donate stock. And I said, Daniel, you take care of this. I don't want to deal with it. So he's got the nonprofit, and he's going to deal with that. And some people have used the Amazon portal. And, of course, Cafe Press, we get a small amount of each sale, which will stop once we become a nonprofit. You can't sell anything as a nonprofit, so that will stop. But that's fine. We can still sell.
And we did well with Parasites Without Borders fundraiser.
Yes, Parasites Without Borders raised $40,000, which still remains there because I cannot take that until we become a nonprofit.
Got it.
Right.
Got it.
Yep. Because then it's taxable if you're not a nonprofit. So I don't want it yet, but I'm working on that, and I'm not very good with working with lawyers, so it's taking time. So
lawyers aren't very good with working with lawyers.
That's fine, but I have my priority this year has been the science, frankly, and that's something. Anyway, so we thought we'd chat for a while on what we liked about our let's say, compelling virology stories from 2020, understanding that they're mainly SARS-CoV-2, COVID-19 related. And I'll go, and then we can alternate and go through these. And of course, my story, of course, is the story of the year. A new virus emerges likely from bats in China, and eventually causes a pandemic, which we first discussed in TWiV 582. And so I have a little treat for all of you. I queued up that first episode. So let's listen to it.
That was the episode where I had some difficulties?
Yeah, you had difficulties. I cut all that out because at some point I said, Brienne says she's having technical difficulties, and I cut that part out, yeah.
Yes.
But anyway.
But I think that what I should have done with those technical difficulties is realize what 2020 was looking
Was it
like.
telling you?
It was telling me, and I should have just, been done there.
Just check out.
So let's listen to this for, 5 minutes or so, because, frankly, it's like TWiV used to be. We're just riffing on things. And listen to this. So we have apparently a new virus in China causing a pneumonia-like illness. Just between this episode and last, this seems to have hit the news, right?
Popped up.
Last Friday, I didn't know anything about this. So there have been many articles all over the place. First, apparently this has been happening in December, end of December. Something like 59 people in Wuhan, China, which is, I got a little map here because I wanted to see where this is. Looks like it's sort of halfway between Beijing in the north and Hong Kong in the south, due east or due west of Shanghai, right?
Right. Yep.
I've never been to China.
Oh, yeah, but Wuhan is a pretty big virology place.
It is, yeah. So 59 cases of people with pneumonia-like illness. No deaths so far. High fever, difficulty breathing, lung lesions. And apparently early on they ruled out SARS coronavirus, avian influenza, MERS coronavirus, adenovirus. Now apparently they closed down the Huanan seafood market, which is in Wuhan. There you can not only buy seafood, but poultry, pheasants, and wild animal meat.
That's Hunan, by the way.
I wrote it Hunan, but I've seen elsewhere Huanan.
Oh.
I'm not sure which one is right. They said a number of cases were traced to it.
But Wuhan is inland from the ocean.
Yeah,
So other fish markets must be involved in this as well. They don't just ship fish to Hunan.
Huanan works too. You get a Huanan, and that is in Perth Amboy, New Jersey.
Really?
It's not the same one. Yeah, Huanan. Here's a Taiwan news article. Huanan is correct.
Oh.
So I had it wrong there.
Oh.
Okay. And then, interestingly, there's been, China was a little bit quiet about this, and usually they weren't sharing.
Just like SARS.
They have a quote the other day, I think this was in the Times, from Lin Fa Wang, who I saw in Singapore not too long ago. He said he was frustrated that scientists in China were not allowed to speak to him about the outbreak.
Huh.
And Lin Fa said he thought it was likely not spreading from humans to humans because health workers had not contracted the disease. He's quoted, "We should not go into panic mode." And then they're online, the authorities have clamped down on discussion. The hashtag Wuhan SARS has been banned, for example. Hong Kong airport, they've put thermal imaging in place. Now, Kathy has a map here. Huanan, right? Is that Wuhan? Yeah, there it is. Isn't it so cool? You can get a map of anywhere in the world now.
It's amazing.
Oh, what's
You can go to Google Earth and actually see what it looks like.
Yeah, there it is, the seafood market right next to Wuhan Rural Commercial Bank. Okay.
Cornered from Hubei Bank.
Yes. So it's a funny combination: fish, pheasants, poultry.
Are they saying 59 different people visited that fish market?
Well, we don't know. See, we have very little information, right?
There's no.
However, apparently the authorities seem to think that this could be a source of a problem.
Yeah, apparently it was shut down and decontaminated or whatever. Frankly, they should shut them all down because that's a good way to get exotic viruses, right? But it's part of their culture, and I understand that they don't want to. Who's going to tell me where to buy my food?
Exactly. No one can tell me where to buy.
I mean, as you'll see, the problem is that if you're going to collect wild animals from the countryside, they could have exotic viruses in them, right?
You bet.
And yesterday, the news had it that it is a new coronavirus. And if you go to ProMed Mail, you can see some discussions there. They have a quote from someone involved in the investigation. While it appears to be transmitted to humans via animals, the Chinese government has not said which animals, nor has it disclosed other details about the outbreak, like the transmission route, the incubation period, or the ages and genders of the patients. Authorities in Wuhan are closely monitoring 163 people who were in close contact with the patients. He added that 15 days, the minimum incubation period for some viral infections. I don't know where that comes from. 15 days is a long time. I mean, some viral infections are 2 or 3, right?
Yeah.
It's true.
had not yet passed since the last reported instance of the disease. Premature to say there's no human-to-human transmission. So if you go to ProMed Mail, you can see they apparently got the whole genome sequence, and so they can make PCR assays now for it, although it's not clear from how many patients they have this virus yet, right? We just don't know.
What's the closest next virus to it?
They say it's a brand new coronavirus never seen before.
Yeah, but it can't be that different from some of the other coronas, right?
Exactly. It has to have, you have to put it on a phylogenetic tree.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I mean, because we know that people have been looking at bat coronaviruses in China. And of course, they've been looking mainly in the South, I believe, where SARS originated. But maybe this is similar to one of them, right? But we don't know. They're holding that close to their vests. Is that what we would say?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They seem to be treading a fine line here. They got roundly bashed for keeping the SARS epidemic quiet for too long.
Yeah.
And so they seem to be a little more open about this. On the other extreme, they don't want to foster panic.
Yeah.
And then it's also China.
It's China. Yep. Guan Yi, a professor of infectious diseases at the University of Hong Kong, who was involved in identifying SARS coronavirus, said, "We can assume this virus transmissibility is not that high." I don't know if you should assume that yet. Who knows? Anyway, we go on and talk about the original SARS a bit, but I just listening to this yesterday. It's just that's the old TWiV, right?
Yeah. That's from a different era.
Just talking about what's going on, what we know about it, put it in context. There's no drive to, I don't know. It just seemed like a day gone by, a year gone by, an era gone by. But that last comment, I don't know why you would assume it doesn't transmit from person to person. Well, anyway.
Maybe the other SARS didn't, so they assume this one didn't.
And that's always been kind of our approach. New stuff comes along and we say, well, could be this, could be that. We don't know yet.
Exactly.
And we're still doing that.
Yeah, for sure. So that was TWiV 582. The name was This Little Virus Went to Market. Okay. And then from that on, that episode on, every one that we did, except for those few travel ones, were related. 584, we called it already, Year of the Coronavirus. So that's my story. And I like, we had an arc, we had many arcs, but one of them was, where did it come from? And as soon as we got the genome sequence, we learned it had a high nucleotide identity with bat SARS-like isolates. And we had a few guests who talked about that. Raul Rabadon, for example, and Ralph Barrick often talked about that, and others. And I think that's a part of the story that remains to be sorted out exactly. So the RATG13 isolate from 2013 and SARS-CoV-2, they share a common ancestor. It's not correct to say that was the precursor of SARS-CoV-2. They're two different. But where the common ancestor was, how it got into people, we still don't know. And I think if we do enough sampling in the coming years, we might be able to sort that out. But I think that's important to find out because it can give us clues about future spillovers like this one.
So I have a comment on the difference in feel of that episode versus what we do now. Because I've been thinking a lot about this lately. That was, at that time, we were still a geeky little podcast.
Yeah.
Talking to 10,000 other nerds, okay? And now it's blossomed to 10 times that. And we get feedback all the time about how people rely on us for, credible information and for analysis. And personally, I feel a significant responsibility to do the right thing.
Sure.
And I think that weighs on all of us to some extent and in different ways, and it affects the quality of the show. Plus, the pandemic itself is huge, okay? And so I think that affects the whole thing. Not necessarily in a bad way, okay? Here we are. We're just doing what we do. And I look forward to I look forward to a time when we're back to being just a geeky podcast. I hope that people stick around. It'll be interesting to see what effect all of this has on us in the long run. But it has had a significant impact.
For sure. Absolutely. That's a great way to put it. Yeah, we used to be a geeky little podcast, cottage industry, whatever. I think we might go back because I suspect a lot of people are leaving. But that's fine. I have no problem with that because I love that conversation I played. I loved it. It was so calm. It was just talking.
And I think we're going to eventually sometime this year get back to, where we can all just geek out on the molecular details of some plant virus and just get back to to that kind of thing. But the priority, I mean, we were standing there at the scene of the crash kind of, and a whole bunch of other people were too. And so you pull people out of the wreckage.
The way I see it, we responded to what people needed, right? Because I remember there was an Ebola outbreak a couple of years ago. Well, I guess it was the West African outbreak. We didn't touch it for a few weeks, and a guy wrote and said, "Hey, what are you doing? You should be covering this." And he was right. So we did. And so right from the get-go, we said we have to do this. And I think it was the right thing to do because frankly, there's no other science podcast that could do this the way we did it. And the guests we got,
actually, in one of my picks for the year is going to kind of come circle back around to this concept of who had to step in and why.
Okay. All right, Kathy, let's take you next. What do you got?
Okay. I also wanted to just comment a little bit about this, and that is that we touched on it. It's a coronavirus, so there were some things we knew, but then all through the year, there were a lot of surprises. Most importantly to me is that how many more organ systems it seemed to involve than maybe SARS-1, and then the finding that there was a lot of asymptomatic transmission. And so that evolving knowledge throughout the year was kind of a theme too. We changed what we said about masks. We changed what we said about this vis-a-vis how serious it was relative to seasonal flu or 1918 flu. And so I think that what it means is that some of the things that I said early on, now if I hear them, I cringe because that's not really what I know now, but based on what we knew then, it was. So there's that. So my first pick is about the discussion of host genetics throughout. And the first one that I can remember was one that Vincent and Rich had in June on TWiV 628, where they just mentioned that there's a COVID-19 host genetics initiative site where data collected could be deposited. And Vincent and Rich also mentioned the ongoing hints that there might be some association of blood type with different blood types with severe disease. Then there was quite a gap until TWiV 671 in October, where there was a science paper from Zhang was the first author and Casanova is the last author. And both Daniel mentioned it in his clinical update, and then Amy, Vincent, Rich, and Alan talked about it. And in this approach of looking at were there differences in host genetics that might start to explain some of these many different phenotypes, disease outcomes? Their targeted gene approach means it's not an unbiased approach, but they were particularly interested in genes involved in innate inborn errors of immunity. In other words, so if a person has some deficiency in one of the innate immune genes, things like that. And so this study, they sequenced exomes or whole genomes from 600 plus patients. And they got the result that, yes, indeed, when they looked at their type 1 interferon signaling genes, that there was some association with them, and that if you inherited a deleterious variant, it could explain some subset of severe disease. We touched on it again in TWiV 674 in October with Lisa Grolinsky, my former student, who's been involved ever since she left my lab with the collaborative cross at UNC. And we discussed a paper of hers on SARS-1 that used these really fabulous genetic mouse models to start to identify genes involved in susceptibility to SARS-1. And it was too early for her to tell us anything about the results with SARS-2, but she's just said, watch this space. And so I suspect we'll be hearing something about that in 2021. And then the last time that I think that it was discussed was on TWiV 676. And there were two studies discussed. One was a GWAS, a genome-wide association study, where samples of people from Italy and Spain, about 1,600 total patients with severe respiratory disease from COVID-19, and about 1,000 controls. And this study pointed out a possible association with the ABO blood group. It just barely met their level of significance. But there was a stronger association with a set of genes on the human chromosome 3. And as is typical for these GWAS, genome-wide association studies, as I said, in the discussion, they look at all the genes within that interval and they talk about why those genes might or might not be related to the disease phenotype. And then it turns out that the second paper we talked about that day was about the Neanderthal genomic study. And there's that same region of chromosome 3 that had 5 or 6 genes underlying it that were candidate genes. That region of the genome in some people with severe COVID-19 disease seems to have been derived from Neanderthal DNA. And so that's just really interesting. And I think we'll be seeing more about that. I think we'll also be seeing more about other associated genes. So for instance, some of those interferon genes that the Casanova study found weren't pulled up in the GWAS studies, but they have a bunch of other genes that I still haven't had time to go and look through to see if it included the neuropilin and the interferon genes and some others. But with more patient samples, they'll get more statistical power and be able to look at additional associated genes. So I'm really excited to see what we learn about this in 2021.
Yeah, this is an upcoming area for sure. I love the title of the 676 Tragic Gene Flow from Neanderthals. I took that right from the paper. That was Svante Pabo, but it's a great title. Alan, what about you?
So one of my picks from the year was, as I was looking back, was I picked really a couple of arcs, and I'll name an episode that was part of those arcs. So the episode when we had Doris on, Doris Cully, is TWiV 599, was really kind of toward the beginning of this arc that has mostly, I guess, been picked up by Daniel Griffin, which is the discussion of non-vaccine pharmaceutical interventions for COVID-19. And Doris talked extensively about ivermectin. At that time, there was the whole hype around hydroxychloroquine going on. And it was just a really great discussion. First of all, it was great to talk to Doris again, because I hadn't seen her since, gosh, I don't know.
90s, right?
Graduate school, yeah. But she was a great guest if you can ever convince her to come back on again, because she's got such insight from a career in the pharma business, and that was great. And then just the ongoing way that whole discussion has evolved, where in many cases it's the ID docs like Daniel who are in there, they look at the evidence and the data and the particular patient they're dealing with, and do we use this? Do we use that? How do we approach this? How do we balance, the needs of saving this person's life versus what evidence we don't have because it's a pandemic and we can't get the data out fast enough. And the way the treatment protocols have evolved. And again, you can go for follow-up on that to all the Daniel Griffin segments, where if you look at what he's talking about in April versus the way they're treating patients now, it's just this whole learning experience that's been very rapid. that I think is a real credit to the medical profession and also the pharmaceutical industry, which has been, pretty open with what their drugs might be repurposed to do, and everybody's kind of pulling together to try and get that to work. And it's not been as hyped as the vaccines, because obviously this is not the way you get out of the pandemic. It's the way you keep people from dying in the pandemic. But I think that was a really cool story that we explored on a lot of episodes.
So the latest Daniel report, which hasn't posted yet, he actually summarized what we've learned about taking care of patients. And, the repurposed therapeutics have been rather disappointing. He said we've basically given up on remdesivir. Convalescent plasma, we've given up on, and many other antivirals. So in a way, it didn't pan out.
It didn't, but I was inspired by the way that people tried.
Sure, of course.
And
you have to try.
This is a very important lesson for future pandemic preparedness. That you've got all this stuff already in the pharmacopoeia, but in point of fact, when we needed it, and we tried all these things, the results weren't all that great. And there is research that suggests we could come up with better general purpose antivirals that might be things that we could deploy in these types of settings, and maybe renewed attention on that would be a good idea.
Rich, how about you?
So, in sort of thinking about this, I was thinking about remembrances from the year. And I'm going to combine what I have here in the show notes is 7 and 8 here into, and I'll be quick. Vincent and I took 2 road trips that I really enjoyed. Vincent mentioned these. And in fact, I was shocked to look back and realize that although all but one of the episodes dropped this year, one of the road trips was in October of 2019. Holy cow. Yep. I didn't realize that. But at any rate, that road trip was, we were invited to go to Galveston to tour their high containment lab by Dennis Benty. And that ultimately spun off. And I think part of my deal here is that listeners don't really get the whole flavor of the road trip by seeing these episodes drop here and there. So I just kind of wanted to summarize what happened. Vincent flew into Austin, and since he was here, we interviewed Chris Sullivan at UT, and that resulted in episode 580, which actually dropped on December 29th of last year. So it doesn't exactly qualify, but it's in the same trip. And then we drove down to Galveston in the TWiV mobile, aka my SUV, and we recorded 2 episodes there. One with the, no offense intended, the old timers from that institution, Jim Leduc, Tom Kizek, and Bob Tesh. And there's an episode with that, 583. And then the following day with several of the scientists, Dennis Benty, Shannon Rossi, Nikos Vislakias, and Scott Weaver. And so those are respectively episodes 583 and 587. And in between time, we had a really nice tour of their high containment facility and their training laboratory. And then we drove back here and Vincent took off. That was a great road trip.
And I have to say,
Galveston before.
Rich, we talked nonstop the whole time. You and I on the road. We went to breakfast, lunch, dinner. We were chatting all the time. And I remember the one place we had breakfast in Galveston, the Mosquito Cafe.
Mosquito Cafe, yeah.
One bite is all it takes.
So we had another road trip that happened in February, okay? And this one I am proud to take credit for doing the scheduling on, because for, months, if not actually years, we had been talking about how we need to interview Bernie Moss. We need to interview Fred Murphy. And while we're at it, let's get Eugene Koonin back on. Mm-hmm. And so I finally decided, okay, let's, I had a college friend who used to have an acronym CCBNA, chit chat, but no action. And I finally decided, okay, let's act on this. Vincent said, go for it. All right. And we found a weekend or late in the week when we could do this. And I scheduled these interviews with Fred Murphy. That's 625, Bernie Moss, 643, and Eugene Koonin, 646. And we met. I flew into Washington. Vincent took the train. I booked us a hotel in Bethesda. We met there, went out to dinner with Bernie, right? And we interviewed him the following day. Oh, the night before. I think it was the afternoon before. We went to Fred's place.
Yeah, that's right.
And I remember so distinctly because the coronavirus thing was just getting rolling. Yeah. Okay. And we talked to him a little bit about the coronavirus. And, that we've talked about this before. Fred lives in a retirement apartment complex, retirement community, going by one of their social rooms and seeing a bunch of people sitting around playing bridge and passing cards back and forth and thinking, oops, that would be a good way to pass this around. Fred, by the way, is fine. Everybody's okay. And that resulted in even a fourth episode, 589, because we got back to the hotel room after one of these interviews and said, we got a little time to kill here. Let's record an episode, which I don't know what the title is Coronavirus, This Could Be Bad.
Yeah.
We were just starting to get the idea. And that's episode 589, which is Vincent and I hanging around in the hotel room, just talking about what was going on. So at any rate, those were two fun road trips. And I don't know how you're going to post this, Vincent, but if it shows up in the show notes and anybody's interested, that's how those episodes relate to each other.
Yeah, they're always fun to do these road trips, right?
Yeah, and those are more the old time TWiV geeky science thing.
Yeah. I mean, so we went to see Fred, then Rich and I recorded in the hotel room. Then we went to dinner with Bernie Moss. Then the next day we go see Bernie. And then he walks us to Eugene. Now, Bernie's not a young guy. He said, no, I'm going to walk you way across campus looking at all the buildings. And we go into Eugene's. We couldn't find it. We didn't know what the right place was. And then we go into Eugene's office. It's just floor to ceiling with paper everywhere. If you look at the video, just papers everywhere. And it's a blast. It's all a blast.
And you managed not to title any of those episodes Weekend at Bernie's.
I don't know. No, we didn't. We didn't have you around, Alan. That's the problem.
No, that's right. We didn't ask you, Alan.
And it just makes me miss travel.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
I was actually thinking
what's that?
Back
What's
at
travel?
TWiV 499 and 500 when we did the Texas road trip.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Dixon, what about you?
Well, I have a lot of fond memories from this year because we've all been hunkered down and, we all ordered industrial level preparation H just so that we could last through it. But then everybody got a gaming chair. What was all that? And then, because that was, you were going to be there for the duration and you had to have a good seat. That's the point. So Vincent and I, we already have good seats. We've got the,
Miller.
Blocking on the name of that famous company.
Miller.
Yeah, that's right.
Well,
that's
Vincent, don't you have a Higgins chair?
Yeah, it's a Higgins chair. That's right.
In my office at Columbia.
That's right. That's right. So I loved the interview with Tony Fauci. I didn't just like it. I loved it because how often do you get a chance to speak with somebody who's just come back from a conference meeting or a briefing with all of the incredibly dense, stupid, monomaniacal idiots that he has to put up with through that administration. And he gives you such a balanced, interesting, almost a level playing field view of, here's the science. And the science is neutral. And science is neutral. It's absolutely neutral. And then to see how that's manipulated, you'll notice, for instance, hydroxychloroquine, Alan, was a big drug at one point, right? And you know who caught the infection. And you also know who didn't take that drug. And you know who was also pushing that drug out the door like it was, Quaker Oats or something. And so that's really, to see a person in charge of how many different administrations has Tony Fauci been through, and how many meetings with Congress and how many meetings with the public. And the man is an absolute rock. He's the same, no matter where he is. He goes on CNN, and I stop what I'm doing and I watch. I said, I think I've heard this before. Actually, you haven't heard any of that before. It sounds like you have, though, because Tony Fauci is a level-headed, I think he must be missing one adrenal gland or something, because, how else can you remain calm in the face of all of this misinformation that's being put forth right before your very eyes, right on live television? How do you do that? And so I have deep admiration for Tony. But I also have deep admiration for Peter Hotez, who I've known for many, many, many years, back when he was a graduate student, a postdoc, a physician up at Yale, doing his research on hookworm, all the way through to his current position of he's risen to a power point in his life that's on a national level equivalent to Tony Fauci. So I look at these two people, and they use different approaches to their messages, but they still manage to keep an even keel. Basically, that's the point. They manage to keep their cool under fire. And I use them as my benchmark for, if I had to do this all over again, if I could come back as a young investor, if I had these episodes to look at, I'd say that's who I'm going to pattern my life after, because I think he really tells it like it is. Everybody else thinks they're telling it like it is, but Tony Fauci and Peter Hotez, they tell it like it is. And because here's the thing about this show, this show, we're talking about not them, we're talking about this show. These people didn't hesitate. Vincent, did you have any problems booking those people? The answer is,
no,
not
at all. Not at all.
No, because they want to talk to people that feel the same way about these things. And here we are. They know where their home is. And I look at this as this is the home of science. This is the home of reason. This is the home of friendly debate. This is where you come to work it out. And we've been doing this for a long time now. It's really, I'm absolutely amazed that I'm still here as enthusiastic as I was at the very beginning. And I know what you're going to say, Vincent, and I don't blame you if you do. There was a moment there where I didn't have this enthusiasm because I didn't realize what the potential for it was. And the moment that's soaked in, that's when I started to make every week rather than passing, geez, I got to go fishing or I got to do this. No, I don't want to do that anymore. And Marlene says, what are you doing Fridays? And I said, take a guess. That's my wife, Marlene. I come here. So I love being part of this. And I think that I will until my molecules are commingling with the universe. Let's just put it that way.
Dixon, the little clip I played from 581, you were in my office, because I remember saying right here in my office, Dixon.
Exactly.
You were there for a while, and then that was it. Yeah.
I'll be back in that office too.
Fauci ought to be able to win the Presidential Medal of Freedom twice.
Absolutely.
He's already got it once. And do you know who gave it to him?
Obama? No.
Clinton?
Nope.
Oh, Bush? Oh, Bush. No. Reagan.
W.
Reagan. Oh, W.
Bush Jr. George W. Bush.
Okay.
George W.
Okay.
George W. Bush.
It's a different era.
Yeah, well, he's been my hero pick for whatever. If you could pick a hero, that's the guy I would pick.
So I liked both of those guests, Dixon, Fauci and Hotez, but they're totally different. Fauci is very diplomatic, right? And Hotez just speaks his mind. And
Yeah, but remember, he has a gentle side to him because he's a pediatrician.
Yeah, I understand.
And he can talk down, and he can sit with you.
And also remember who works where and who would be unemployed if they spoke too frankly.
That's very true.
I'm sure that if Hotez were in Fauci's position, he would tone it down.
Yeah.
Sure.
Anyway,
of course he would.
Brianne, what do you have for us?
So when I've been thinking back about this year, I've thought a lot about things I've learned and things that I feel like I will be talking about and teaching about far into the future. And one of those things is the idea of sort of longer term effects after an acute viral infection, particularly something we've talked about on and off in a lot of episodes, but the most prominently in episode 680 when we talked about long haul COVID with Maddie Hornick, Fiona Lowenstein, and David Tuller. And we got to hear about their experiences with long haul COVID and sort of ways that we might think about long-term effects of viral infection. One of the positives might be too strong a word, but one of the effects of a pandemic is that there are larger numbers of cases. And so sometimes rare events can be studied a little more easily and better understood. And I wonder whether these types of examinations and these types of stories will help us understand some other conditions where we might see some rare events of long-term effects following other types of viral infections. And because we've recognized and started to characterize this with long haul COVID, we might be able to help a lot of different patients in a lot of different situations. We talked about one sort of possible paper with mechanisms about what could be going on in 683 with some prothrombotic autoantibodies that were in a paper. But I think that one thing that I'm kind of looking forward to as we go forward into 2021 is all of the ways that we might start to understand what's going on in some of these cases and the way that could transform kind of our understanding of viral pathogenesis and immune responses to viruses.
For sure. Well, after this pandemic is over, people will work on this virus and learn fundamental things for years and years and years because it's so interesting.
Exactly. And I really hope that, there may be lots of patients, including perhaps some of the ME/CFS patients who get some answers because of these things that we've learned.
So let's do another quick round. One of my other arc that I really liked was this mRNA vaccine story, right? Which I don't even know when we first mentioned it. We were so skeptical in the beginning, although Condit always said, this is going to work. I have a good feeling about this. And, the idea of using RNA, I'm brought up to don't even look at RNA. It's going to break up if you're not careful. And they're making a vaccine. They're encapsulating it in a lipid nanoparticle. And this began in January, right away, as soon as the sequence came out. We said, spike alone, that's no good. And then slowly, phase 1, and we covered it all. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. At every point, we covered it, and it looked better and better. And, clinical trials are no day at the beach to do. It's one thing to make this vaccine candidate and make kilograms of mRNA in vitro, but to actually do the trials is really, really hard. And I admire all the people that have done that. And now we have two companies, Pfizer and Moderna, that have in the 90th percentile for efficacy in their phase 3. It's being stuck into people as we speak. Amy Rosenfeld got hers the other day. She got the Pfizer vaccine along with the Lipkin lab. Daniel Griffin got his Pfizer vaccine. And you know what Daniel told me yesterday? This is really horrible. He said 80% of the vaccine is sitting in freezers in various states, and it's not being distributed because of logistics.
I saw a statistic today. Massachusetts has received 230,000 doses, or is will have received that by a very short period of time. They've delivered like 75,000 of them.
Yeah, it's too bad.
Just because of the logistics of getting it into people's arms. My sister was the first in my immediate family to get hers. She's a paramedic down in New Bedford. She texted me with a shot of her little card for that she got the Moderna.
Yeah.
And then Laura, my wife, got hers on Monday, also Moderna.
So I think there are lots of questions still ongoing about these mRNA vaccines, how long they last and so forth. But I suspect that we've seen a new paradigm in vaccination, and this is going to be used for many other, not only infectious diseases, but genetic conditions where you have to deliver therapeutics. So, and I admit that I was skeptical, and I just I'm amazed now at the way this whole thing.
Nobody'd had a working mRNA vaccine before. It was a totally new strategy. And so totally appropriate to be skeptical while other people were developing, inactivated vaccines and other types of vaccine platforms that are well established. yeah, I think the skepticism was justified. But as you say, every time a new trial came out with better data, we'd say, okay, yeah, looks like it's moving along.
I mean, these mRNA vaccines were worked on for years before, and we never covered them on TWiV, frankly, because we had covered DNA vaccines, and they're not very useful, at least in people. So, but I'm just blown away by this and the amazing. And the thing is, here we are less than a year from that episode that I played you, and we have vaccines going into people. That is just amazing, folks. I never thought it would happen.
Can do with enough money.
I never thought it would happen. Money and talent and ingenuity, for sure.
The talent and the ingenuity were there, and then the acceleration. And Tony talked about this. A lot of it was just doing things in parallel. Yeah. Like producing the vaccine under GMP conditions for the phase 1 trial while you're still in the preclinical phase, which you would never do before. Ever get any corporate people to approve. I mean, you're going to do what? It's not, maybe it won't work. We'll waste millions of dollars. But if you've got the millions of dollars, then you can.
And one last thing I want to mention. This is a vindication of basic science.
Yes.
T7 RNA polymerase from a bacteriophage. T7 promoter, the stuff that people developed years ago because they wanted to use it for research purposes, now is useful. That's a vindication of letting good science just go,
Knowing some things about spike structure.
Yes.
Having people studied coronaviruses for years and years, and most people outside virology what kind of viruses?
We've mentioned this before, but it's worth emphasizing. And it's not like the pandemic struck and people said, "Oh, let's try an mRNA vaccine."
Yeah.
Okay. The research into this, not only the basic research that makes for messenger RNA and T7 RNA polymerase and stuff, but the whole concept of an mRNA vaccine has been going on for a long time. Yep. So it was ready to go.
Yeah, we took on the billions of dollars being put into this. I think part of the problem with the rollout is that we haven't had the billions of dollars put into that.
That's right.
And that's why there's still vaccines sitting in freezers. And hopefully that will change.
The distribution and logistics got shortchanged.
Kathy,
they just arrested somebody for purposely removing 500 doses of vaccine from a refrigerator and letting it sit out until it became inactivated. So you've got mischief associated with this too.
But there's a little bit of that too, but it's mostly just
it's inefficiency because we've never had this opportunity before.
We've never had this. Although in 1947, 6 million New Yorkers were immunized within 2 weeks.
Yeah,
and also if you remember, we were talking about how was this going to be rolled out, and I said, I thought it would be like the polio oral vaccine where you would go to high schools and big venues. And sure enough, here they started to give it in the hospital, and now they're going to be giving it in the Michigan Stadium. And that's the case all over.
Michigan Stadium.
Well, and in terms of these past examples, I mean, you're pointing to the 1940s and such, and the polio vaccine rollout in the 60s. But let's bear in mind that every year, something like 100 million plus Americans get a flu shot.
That's right. Yeah, that's right.
Which is logistically very similar. And the people who do that work are there and they've got infrastructure for it. And it's just a question of getting organized to distribute these vaccines through that kind of infrastructure. There is a complexity with the Pfizer one because you got to keep it at -70. But the Moderna vaccine could be distributed pretty much like a flu shot. This could have been...
The complexity of wanting to have the physical distancing at the same time.
There is that, yes.
Yeah.
There is a lot of that, actually.
But I went and got my flu shot this year, right? And that seemed to work, wearing a mask. And
that was fine. Kathy, you have something else you want to share?
Sure. My arc is about a variety of things relating to minority health and health disparities. As Vincent mentioned already, we had Robert Fullilove on in August on TWiV 655. So he's a socio-medical scientist, according to how Vincent billed it. And he was just fascinating. He's been on top of this topic for his whole life. Rich did a masterful job of pulling out his background as best as he could. And so I recommend that to people to go listen to. In the next episode, we actually talked about a paper about health disparities. Another thing was that we got to have some various aspects of diversity in science on when we had Kizzmekia Corbett, as already mentioned. She was key to the vaccine preparedness. In fact, with the Moderna RNA vaccine and so forth. We had a couple people on from Black in Microbiology, Ari Kozik and Kishana Taylor on TWiV 672. And then another aspect of diversity, when we had Sabra Klein on, her research has been about infectious disease and the differences between males and females, and particularly with respect to viral infections. And so another word that we haven't used yet maybe is pivot. And like many people, she was able to pivot her research and start to look at things with respect to SARS-CoV-2. And then kind of related to that, disparities in how the pandemic has treated people, not just with respect to physical health, but it's been particularly hard on a number of populations. It's disproportionately affected women's careers. Ed Yong just had an article in The Atlantic where this is described. Vincent's going to touch on this with his pick of the week. But I also want to mention something that Ed Yong said. The tsunami of rushed but dubious work made life harder for actual experts who struggled to sift the signal from the noise. They also felt obliged to debunk spurious research in long Twitter threads and relentless media interviews, acts of public service that are rarely rewarded in academia. And they were overwhelmed by, of course, requests to peer review the gazillions of papers that came out. And so with respect to just women in general in the workforce, they've had a harder time of it. There's predictions that this has set the careers of women in the workforce back some number of years. And scientists of color also found it harder to do those pivots than others. And that's another thing that Ed Yong points out. So just wanted to touch on several of those aspects.
I got to send Ed Yong a total of all the TWiV hours we've spent this year.
Yes.
Because I think he needs to know that a lot of people have been doing other things besides interviews and Twitters, and that sort of thing.
Yes. So I think that all of the things that Kathy has talked about are just so important and are one of those situations where we realize that as much as, I, for example, might want to spend all my time thinking about viruses in the immune system, we can't separate viruses and their effects from a lot of other things that are going on in the world. And that has been very clear as we think about health disparities, as well as we think about aspects of diversity in science. At the very beginning of this episode, Rich made some comments about how he felt like in some ways we had stepped up. We felt a need to kind of fill, some people's want for information. And I think that in a lot of ways, that's what we got from Ari and Kishana when we were talking to them about Black and microbiology. They saw a problem and they stepped up to try to fix it by making sure that there was great recognition of Black people in microbiology, both in terms of activism, and of course we saw that there was some awesome science being done as well, both by them and by Kizzmekia. And so hopefully we can continue to step up and try to make things right and fill needs that we see in coming years.
Alan, you want to give us another pick?
Yeah, so this is going to segue from a couple of other things we've been talking about already, but I'm going to anchor it with the Tony Fauci episode, which Dixon picked, but to take it in a slightly different way here. that was really one point along an arc that I would actually trace back to at least 2016. There was an episode we did called Doctors TWiV Go to Washington, where some of us did a live episode from ASM when we were there for the Science March. And that was an event inspired by what we feared was going to be an anti-science approach to regulation in Washington. And that, of course, turned out to be correct. Which culminated in 2020 with the arrival of a pandemic and a completely inept federal response because of that anti-science approach in Washington. You know, I really hate to say we told you so, but here we are. And the reason Tony Fauci was thrust into the position that he was in, I mean, yes, he should have been involved with the pandemic in the sense of he runs the premier infectious disease research institute in the world. And obviously they were going to be heavily involved in vaccine development in many aspects of this. And his face would be on TV, but not as he should not have been the authority on public health response. That job should be the CDC director, who unfortunately was possibly the wrong person for the job, but very much and very critically hamstrung by the administration so that he could not be the right person for the job. He was not allowed to do the job that he was supposed to be doing in running the CDC. And that is how TWiV became political. I mean, or a big part of it, because when the politics is interfering with the science, then the scientists have to step in and say, no, you can't mix that. You can't have your own alternative facts that fit your ideology better. The world doesn't work that way. And that's where we came from the Science March. That's where we ended up in 2020. That's how we get, you know, Tony Fauci having to step up and provide the information that he uniquely could because he was the only person who was allowed to. Or really more to the point, I think that they didn't know how to stop him fast enough. And so, you know, then he was already on TV and the public was trusting him more than anybody else. And that was good, but it was good in a like, oh, the backup parachute worked kind of way. You know, so, and I think some of that's not going to go away because a lot of the ingredients that led to it, you know, yes, we're going to change administrations at the top, but we've still got the situation in my industry, in the news media, where we've got a crisis in journalism, and it's very hard to get fact-based reporting done, and that persists. So I think we're going to continue to have issues with people who want to live outside reality. We're going to continue to have a political arc on TWiV, and if you don't like it, well, you can change the channel because this is going to come up whenever the politics conflicts with the
It's
science.
great. I'm so glad you went back to the 2016. I want to show a slide that I started using in 2017. And it came from the editorial board. Can you guys see this?
Yep.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Editorial board, September 9th, 2017, President Trump's war on science. And I use this in my science communication talks all the time for why we have to say things way back when. Rich, you have something else for us?
We interrupt this program to bring you a message from space. One of my favorite episodes was the interview with Kate Rubins from the International Space Station. For those of you who might not be familiar with this is TWiV 682. We have a history with Kate because she herself has a career history as she was trained as a molecular biologist, virologist, and had a career as such for a while, and then but always had an interest in being an astronaut. Opportunity came along. She applied. She became an astronaut. She's had one trip to the space station. We interviewed her after that at an ASM meeting where she was the keynote speaker. And then she is now up for her second tour on the space station. I actually had an email from her this morning wishing everybody a Happy New Year. And she said that they said Happy New Year like 24 times as they've been
right, it's all the time zones.
and they've been orbiting the Earth, and they and I think this is cool. They actually had the New Year's celebration following Russian traditions. Two of the astronauts with them are Russian, and New Year's in Russia apparently is a huge deal. So they celebrated it at New Year's Russian time, formally. The rest of the time they were floating around yelling Happy New Year every little while, every time they crossed the time zone. At any rate, so that was a really, for me, a really fun episode. And I look forward to sticking around and interviewing Kate from the moon.
Yeah.
Sometime in the future.
If you thought the 2 to 3 second delay from Earth orbit was a big deal, wait till we... What's the delay from the moon? Does anyone know? Is it like 30 seconds or something?
Oh, it's got to be a lot, yeah.
240,000 miles, however long it takes.
I'm not sure how you
do the calculation.
It's a little bit, yeah.
Rich, I think we're going to just have to go to the moon.
You know,
it's fine with me.
We could work a way out of communicating with lasers, however. That's instantaneous.
Okay.
But it's still, no, it's limited the same way. Even at the speed of light, there's going to be a lag.
A little bit, but they have a device on the moon that you can hit with a laser beam. Did you know that?
Yes.
They left it there, and it's incredible. I mean, things like that just astound me.
You can ham radio operators actually. This takes more antennas than I feel like building, but there's a form of communication called EME, Earth Moon Earth, where if you set up a big enough antenna and you pour 1,000 watts of radio energy into it at the right frequencies and aim it at the moon does not explode. That takes more wattage, but you can bounce a signal off the moon back to Earth, and somebody with a good receiving antenna can receive it, and you can have a two-way conversation via the moon.
Okay, Alan, you can work out the tech for TWiV. Okay.
Yeah, so I'll start working on the tech. Maybe I will build that antenna.
Okay.
The propagation time to the moon and back ranges from 2.4 to 2.7 seconds.
There you go.
That's not bad at all.
No,
yeah, so it would be
bad.
like if you had a direct radio link, it would be like a satellite lag.
Yeah, because that's what we had with her in low Earth orbit, right? Dixon, is there anything else you want to share with us?
Just one other thing, and I believe you were responsible for this one, although I don't know for sure because I don't know the origins of her being picked, but there was an art/science presentation by Laura Splan that I watched, and I watched, and I watched. I don't know how many times I've seen this. You see something new every time you see it. It's fabulous, not just good. It's fabulous. She has a science background, and she has an artistic mind. And so I would call that a science art hybridoma. She combines the best of both worlds. And it's not only entertaining, it's educational. So, just if you want to see some iteration of a combination of backgrounds that came together in the same person, this is the one I would absolutely pick over anybody else I've ever seen. Laura Splan's presentation was
she's great.
Mind-blowing at every level. And I can't believe the diversity of uses of science to express art. And it was just fabulous.
I loved it because her art is terrific, but her sensibility, how she explains what she's doing, that's just
exactly right. She knows what's going on, and then that's just wonderful.
I loved it too. Yeah, I discovered her years ago. I found her art, and then I've been following her on Instagram, and I thought, let's get her on. She's in Brooklyn.
Thank you for pointing her in our direction. It was just wonderful.
When we can visit again, she can come visit my lab. Maybe I'll offer to have her do what did she went to a lab and did an
installation. She can do an installation.
No, something, artist in residence. That's right. That's what we need in my lab. We need an artist in residence. She can commute from Brooklyn. Brianne, what have you got?
So the other thing that I feel like I have thought about and learned a lot about this year is thinking about the question of what makes an immune response protective. I think for a long time, people were sort of like immune responses are immune responses, and having an immune response is enough. But here we've spent a lot of time this year thinking about what actually makes an immune response protect you from infection. And that has come up on many episodes where we've been discussing vaccines and vaccine trials, what responses have been elicited by those vaccines, and whether or not those types of responses would be protective. It actually came up even before that when there were lots of papers talking about cross-reactive responses with other coronaviruses and questions of why or why not. That was really bad grammar.
We got it.
Thinking about why those responses might be protective or why those responses might not be protective. And so I feel like this has been another question that has come up again and again that I hope immunologists spend a lot more time on in the future.
Okay. All right. Now I want to do something really quickly with all of you. Rapid fire. What's your favorite TWiV episode title? Rich.
Mask Hysteria, 635.
That was mine.
Alan Dove.
Does Antibody really know what time it is? 6:77.
Brienne.
Vax to the Future, 693.
Dixon.
Well, Richard, Alan and I have the same pick. Does anybody know what time it is? But for a different reason, Alan. I don't know if you know this or not, but the Chicago singing musical group has a trombone player that's absolutely fabulous. And he's a fly tire.
I knew he was a fabulous trombonist. I didn't know he was a fly tire.
Yeah, so I'm a lousy trombonist. I'm an okay fly tire. So naturally, I would gravitate towards that. So thank you so much. I must say that I think we owe Alan a vote of confidence and credit. You are clever beyond belief. You really are. And these titles
it's a neurological problem. It's
wonderful.
Okay.
They're wonderful. They're not just good. They're wonderful. So thank you, Alan.
Thank you.
Yes. And Kathy, how about you?
I couldn't limit myself to one. I wanted to bracket the year. So I picked the first one from January 10th on coronavirus. This little virus went to market. And then, like Brienne, Vax to the Future, because now we're in the vaccine era.
Yeah, as much as I love Vax to the Future, when I was skimming through the titles to pick, I have to say that I laughed pretty hard when I saw the one called Coronavirus Update. It could be bad.
That was actually a quote of Tony Fauci's early on. He said it could be bad. Right.
Mm-hmm. Alan, maybe we could recruit you for a part of some sort of GWAS study for the genetic defect that causes puns or something.
Yes.
It has to be a Neanderthal gene addition.
Yeah, right.
That's it.
So my favorite title was actually contributed by a listener, Countering a Miasma of Anti-Think. Because I don't remember who, but a listener said, you guys, for me, this is what you do. And we have now T-shirts with that on. They're very popular. So
it's a good phrase.
Picking titles we do after the episode's over. It's always a fun time. And, they're all recorded. So maybe one day we'll put together a sampling of how we go through the title. Sometimes it can be funny. It's really good.
Well, one thing we haven't had in a long time are Easter eggs. And sometimes that's where you have put some of our title choice discussions.
Yeah, I haven't done that in a long time. It's true. Let's quickly read. I put all the short poems near the top. A collection. I would like to read just a few more. Let me take this first one. This is by Jeffrey, who wrote, "Viruses know not how much their hosts they disrupt. They just replicate." And you like that one, Kathy, right?
Yeah, I like that one in particular because it's a haiku and it scans. It's got the right number of syllables and it's got good content.
Yes.
Yeah, I had to look. So when Kathy was saying, 575 is a good scanning haiku, right? 5 syllables, 7-5. And then a limerick, of course, has to be AABBA, where A rhyme and B is typically a little shorter.
Disappointingly, I don't think ABBA ever recorded any limericks.
Kathy, you want to take the limerick?
Sure. There was an old gal from Duluth who wanted to find out the truth. Mass media failed, but science prevailed. Not wearing a mask is uncouth. That was from Vicky.
That's great.
And that scans.
Yes.
Yes.
Brienne.
This is from Karen. It's called Corona Masks. She wouldn't. She didn't. She couldn't. She isn't.
I should love that. That's great. I mean, it's not something you should love, but it's really good. And Rich.
From Kitty Cat. Alone. Feeling manic during this pandemic. Sanity fading. Happiness deflating. Suffocated by stupidity. Herd-like rigidity. Whatever you do, just cover your face, for I am sick of this confounding place.
It's very powerful. Really like that too. So these were not our winners, but we have many more that are like this, which we'll read in the coming episodes because they're also
the next one.
So
the next one up is an epic.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's an epic, and then
they were all wonderful to try to put these.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
to say which ones are the best and not, they were all very thoughtful.
They're all very good. Really well done.
I'd say.
All right, let's finish with some picks. Dixon, what do you have for us?
I've got two. One is a pictures of the year ending 2020 from NASA, and they're all on Flickr. I don't know why that is. You'll have to explain that to me some other time. Please, let's not do it now. But because I don't even know what Flickr. I think Flickr is just a collection of pictures, frankly. But this was done by the brass at NASA throughout the whole year, and then put online on their website. And so I went to it as an act of desperation, not knowing what to pick. And I just was floored. And I picked it for you mainly, Rich, because I know that you're such a space freak, and so am I. And I found them, excuse the pun, Alan, but I found them very uplifting. But I had a second pick because after that, I went down to have breakfast with my wife, and we were sitting at the table, and the new New Yorker had just arrived. And inside, there is an article that I can't believe you won't read this article. You have to read this article. It is a summary of the year written by Lawrence Wright. He's a staff writer for the New Yorker magazine. And it is accurate, and it is humanistic, and it shows all the flaws and pimples and warts and scars and anti-science attitudes. And finally, and I'm not going to give you a spoiler alert, except you have to read the whole article before you get to the last sentence. When you get to the last sentence, if you don't cry, literally cry tears, not just for joy, but also for sadness, because it's a sad moment that he chronicles at the end, but it's a joyful, uplifting moment at the same time. So that I read that article, and I said, I'm going to make this my pick, and my wife yells at me as I come into my computer, but did you read it? It's a long article. It goes from page 22 to page 58. New Yorkers never give articles that long. But this was the one that really stuck. It really stuck. So those are my two, but I know I only get one.
That's
so
fine.
if I had to pick one,
you can have two. You can have two.
The NASA.
It's fine.
It would be the NASA.
You've been doing this for 12 years.
And by the way, just
Dixon.
to clarify, Dixon, it's okay if you don't know exactly what Flickr is, because Flickr doesn't know exactly what it is.
Thank you.
I'll tell you about it later, Dixon.
Yeah.
Brianne, what do you have?
So I have the latest article by Ed Yong. I know everyone's shocked. And so this is a long piece called Where Year 2 of the Pandemic Will Take Us by Ed Yong. Although it is less about predictions and more about sort of open questions and issues that will need to be solved. So there is a lengthy section about issues with vaccine distribution, about healthcare workers and the amount of kind of overwork they have been having, the disparities that we talked about earlier between different groups, and questions about how we might learn from some of those things moving forward. And so I just thought that this was a particularly nice summary of a lot of the issues, both in science, but also outside of science, that we've been thinking about throughout the year. And hopefully we can learn from a lot of these things moving forward.
We were this close to getting Ed on TWiV.
I would really like it if we got Ed on Twitter.
Yeah, well,
Someday.
We're buddies. We correspond, and we'll get him on. No problem. There's plenty of time.
I think if you had a chance to get Lawrence Wright on, he would make an excellent interview.
Okay, Alan, what do you have for us?
I have an article that I came across in the Japan Times, of all places. I try to diversify my news feed as much as I can. But this is just a really interesting insight into something I was not aware of at all. There's anti-vaccine sentiment. We've talked about that, and it's prevalent in the US and it's prevalent in Europe. There is anti-vaccine or vaccine hesitancy in Japan as well, but it's different, and it has different origins and reasons, and the history of it is very interesting. And I think people really ought to look into this and see how the whole discussion has evolved there, because we think of Japan appropriately as being a very advanced technological science-loving nation, and I think that's generally correct. But there is apparently a rocky public history and some legal issues that have come up in the history of vaccination there that make it a little problematic. And it may not be the Japanese may not line up quite as readily as you might expect to get their COVID-19 vaccines, and there's a lot of concern about that.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Rich, what do you have for us?
Well, last week I picked a montage of the Boston Dynamics robots showing their stuff, and since then, this little video dropped that's going viral at this point, which is the Boston Dynamics robots dancing to this old song, "Do You Love Me?" And it's absolutely brilliant, just brilliant. I can't stop watching it. I won't say more. Click on this sucker and watch it. It's great.
It's wonderful. And by the way, Rich, have you seen the movie Chappie?
No.
Oh, okay. Look that up. It's a few years old, but look that up on Netflix.
Okay.
Actually, everybody should probably see that. It's
a good movie.
Really good. It's bizarre. You've not seen another movie like it, but it's really good, and it features a lovable robot.
Just before that, I wasn't sure if you pointed out that the poetry winners were on TWiV 700, giving the episode its title name, "'Twas COVID and the Aerosols." So we read the top ones there, and then we have lots more to keep reading. They were hard to judge, as Dixon said, and so they're all kind of close in their final scores. But we did what we could. So I picked 3 things. I'll be sorry next time I have to do a pick because I'll be scrambling for something, but these are all very timely. So there was a really good interview with Paul Offit giving updates on the vaccine rollout and just the kinds of things that we were talking about earlier. And then because this is the first time we've ever done a podcast on New Year's Day, I have 2 things about Auld Lang Syne. And the first is a really lovely choral rendition of it by the choral scholars of University College London. And I said London, but I had the feeling that wasn't who it was. Anyway, it's a really good YouTube. And then John Green. And if you don't know John Green, he's the one who wrote The Fault in Our Stars. He and his brother Hank have had a website for a long time. It's a video blog called The Vlog. And then he has a solo channel called Anthropocene Revisited. And from the comments, I understand that he posted this a year ago. And so watching it now is quite interesting. It's very, when you first see it, you think this is a video, but if you keep watching the video, it takes you in, and then the audio is really effective also. So it's an essay on Auld Lang Syne and other things in his life. And then when I sent that to a friend, he sent me back the following that I wanted to give you, and Alan and Dixon may already know it. It's an Alan Sherman thing. And oh, a man whose name is Lang, and he has a neon sign, and Mr. Lang is very old, so they call it Auld Lang Syne.
Very good.
Dude.
Very nice. Lovely. I think you sang previously Old Lang Syne for us on TWiV.
Yes.
In fact,
we had a TWiV version of Old Lang Syne on the previous year end, I think.
All right, my pick is shameless ripoff of Nels' pick yesterday on TWiVo, but it's such a cool article, and not a lot of TWiV listeners listen to TWiVo, so I want you to check this out. It's an article in Wired by David Cox, How mRNA Went from a Scientific Backwater to a Pandemic Crusher. I do not like the headline. mRNA was never a scientific backwater. Excuse me. It's really important, Mr. Headline Writer. However, this is the story of Catalin Carrico, who had the idea. mRNA was only discovered in 1961. And in the 70s, she had the idea of using it for therapeutic purposes. And this chronicles her career and how difficult it was. And it is amazing now that it's come to be that as an mRNA vaccines are being very useful. And, she was a pioneer here, but it also is a great story about how hard a scientific career is. It's just not easy to get all things together to work and have a job and put, family and everything together with that. Sometimes things don't work out. It's just not meant to be friendly for everyone in the end. It's hard. It's really hard. But now she's at BioNTech, which of course is partnered with Pfizer to make this mRNA vaccine. So great story. All great except for that backwater man.
Yeah, and she took a demotion at Penn because they didn't believe that what she was doing was going to go anywhere, and then eventually she left and went to BioNTech, and it's kind of like revenge is the best reward.
That's where it went.
This illustrates you do not make judgments about what you think will happen with a project. You take a good person with an idea and you let them run with it. Because I have had so many examples of when people, this is not going to work in a study section, and it works fine. Don't ever say that, folks. You just don't know. And that's a great example of it. Yeah, you know that, Dixon, right? We all do.
I used to hear that all the time at the study sections.
I know. It's just not right.
People just throw that out like that's crap. That's not going to work, And meanwhile, in the progress report, by the way, it's already worked.
And we have a listener pick from Louise. Good morning, Twivers. For some of us, 2020 means listening to TWiV while knitting. Listener knitters might appreciate this tool for stomping out the virus. Thanks to Jenny Penny for her inspired work. And
this is good.
Gives links to some virus socks here that you can knit. And a pattern as well, a link to the pattern. Lovely colors, actually, as well.
Yeah.
Many thanks from a loyal listener, learner, and financial contributor. Enjoy and peace, Louise in Austin, where it is 38F, 3C, and drizzling. And joy and peace, man. What more can we say than that? That is
Absolutely.
That is TWiV 702, the first of many in 2021. Boy, now I have to get used to saying 2021. Thanks for being with us on this journey. Stay with us. More to come. You can find the show notes at microbe.tv/TWiV. Send your questions and comments to twiv@microbe.tv. And if you like what we do, consider supporting us. microbe.tv/contribute. For the first time in a long time, the entire TWiV crew is here today. Everybody is here. I don't know when the last time
it's been a while
that happened.
It's true. And in the middle of a pandemic.
Maybe it was that 581.
It actually made it easier in some respects.
That's true. It did. It did.
Maybe it was the beginning of the year. That first episode was certainly one. We were all there.
I've got to say, in my work, it's actually been a lot easier to get in touch with people.
It is. Yeah. It is, yeah.
No, that's right.
A big part of my job has always been setting up interviews with people. And when can we talk? And I'm busy. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Oh, he's out of the country. Everybody's home.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Or at least they should be.
They should be. Yeah. It's not always easy, but it's
right. And so, all of you, I'm very grateful for your time and participation in this. And I want to thank, in order of your joining TWiV, Dixon Despommier is at trichinella.org, thelivingriver.com. Many thanks, Dixon.
Vincent, the association has been going on so long that we have fused our intellects, as I would say. And I'm the one who gained from that. I'm so sorry that you had to go through that, but
it's okay.
I've learned so much since I've been part of this show. It's just been amazing. Thank you.
I'm not the most patient person in the world, so forgive me.
No, that doesn't matter.
I'm lose my patience with you and others.
We've outlasted the Beatles, for God's sakes.
Yeah, indeed. Alan Dove is at alandove.com and at Alan Dove on Twitter. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure and has been for years.
Rich Condit is an emeritus professor at the University of Florida, Gainesville, currently in Austin, Texas. Thank you, Rich.
Sure enough, always a good time. And I want to give I don't know how to describe this as sort of a backhanded or weirdo thank you to the coronavirus. Because when we have an opportunity to look at this from the other side, we will see, if we have not already, that it's been a great teacher in many, many realms.
Sure.
And I hope we can take those lessons home with us and keep them.
Indeed. Kathy Spindler's at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor. Thank you, Kathy.
Thank you, Vincent. And thank you, everybody, to all the co-hosts. I know that you put in a lot of time to get prepared for these episodes, and it, for us, doesn't really compare to the amount of time Vincent puts in, but we couldn't do it without this great team effort. So it's really fun to do, and this was one of the good ones.
It's a great team, and I must say, always uplifting. It's always uplifting. Brianne Barker, our latest addition, is at Drew University and on Twitter, BioProf Barker. Thank you, Brianne.
Thank you. It was really great to be here. I still can't quite believe my fortune in being able to be a part of this and to get to talk with you all so frequently. So I want to thank all of the co-hosts and, of course, Vincent for just being so cool.
I frequently find myself asking, how the hell did we do this without Brianne?
That's right.
I mean, it really, that's been a great addition.
Made a lot of mistakes.
The feeling is mutual.
Made a lot of mistakes.
Thank you. Yeah.
Brianne,
you guys are so cool.
That's the nicest thing you could say, that I'm cool. Nobody tells me that. Thank you so much. I'm Vincent Racaniello. You can find me at virology.blog. I'd like to thank the American Society for Virology and the American Society for Microbiology for their support of TWiV, and Ronald Jenkins for the music. This episode of TWiV was recorded, edited, and posted by me, Vincent Racaniello. You've been listening to This Week in Virology. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back next week. Another TWiV is viral.